Hey there, that's the new Canon 70-200mm f4 of the second generation. That's the Canon 70-200mm f2.8, also of the second generation. We will compare both lenses, both for you today, not because they are necessarily better than the other one. It's all about making the correct decision before buying one of these lenses. They look almost the same in terms of colors, however the 2.8 version is a lot more heavy and bigger than the f4 version, which might be the biggest difference so far. Filters are cheaper using the f4 version since you need only 72mm filter threads instead of 77mm. There are several switches at the left side of each lens. One for the minimum focus distance, one switch to change from autofocus to manual focus and to enable the image stabilizer. At the bottom are two modes, one for handheld photos, for instance during night, and a second mode for any kind of movements, like swinging behind a moving car. The zoom ring so as the focus ring feel both great and valuable. No scratchy sound in either of these glasses, compared to other manufacturers. We just noticed some kinds of loose parts inside the f4 version. It sounds like the 100mm macro lens, but don't worry about it, that might be the image stabilizer and no loose parts inside the lens. Both lenses have a focus distance indication on top. The 70-200mm f2.8 version comes with a tripod mount. If you require one for the f4 version, you will need to spend more than $100 for the original version. The difference in terms of weight is remarkable. If you're traveling a lot and using a camera with a good low-light performance, it might be useful to take the f4 version, which saves a lot of money as well. For concerts, it might be favorable to have a faster aperture like f2.8 instead. It's also a matter of space in your pocket. I do enjoy both lenses in combination with my 5D Mark IV. The f2.8 version is better during low-light shots, but does not really matter during bright daylight shootings. Let's have a look at some weak areas of both lenses. It's hard to find any kind of chromatic aberrations with any of these lenses. There's a bit of color distortion at the edges. Since Canon updated the 70-200mm f4 version, it has a slightly better performance than the f2.8 version. Next, but for some of you not least important, are the dark edges, so-called vignetting. Not a big issue if you are familiar with Adobe Lightroom. Using the f2.8 version, you need to stop down to approximately f5.6, 6.3 to get rid of these edges. On the f4 version, the magic number is 7.1 to f8. Nothing that should really bother you if you use Adobe Lightroom. One man's trash is the other one's treasure. Time to have a look at some flares using the 70-200mm lenses. Most people enjoy these flares during a portrait shooting in front of the sunset. You will have less flares if you point both lenses straight into the sun. If you point both lenses in an indirect angle into the light, will definitely show more flares. Anyways, for some shots it's preferable to have some of them. It's easy to separate the fore from the background using both 70-200mm lenses. That's great for all filmers out there and people photographers who like to use the manual focus of their lenses. The focus ring of the 2.8 version is slightly bigger and feels a bit better. Bear in mind that the 2.8 version is a bit more front heavy than the other version. Both of these lenses are perfect for sport, event and wedding photography. One requirement is that you need to be quite close. Today we went into the zoo in Frankfurt to be a bit closer to some animals that we don't really see on the streets. The autofocus of our 5D4 worked perfect in combination with both lenses. It does not really matter if you take your photos using the live view or the optical viewfinder. The major difference between both lenses is the aperture and the weight. So which lens is better for wildlife photography? If you take your photos most of the time during daylight, I don't see any reason for the 2.8 version. If you consider getting one of these lenses for wildlife photography while spending a lot of time in the forest or at night safari, I recommend investing a bit more for better results. On the other side of the lens is still the camera, which gives you a better performance if you are using a full frame body instead of an APS-C sensor camera, which seems to bring you a bit closer through the small sensor, #crop factor. Both lenses are equipped with an image stabilizer. That's a perfect tool for filming or shots during low light scenarios. Using these two lenses, you can expect to have better results using the 2.8 version. Taking photos at night using longer exposure times is easier using the image stabilizer. It's obvious that you can use even longer exposure times using the 2.8 version than the f4 version. Using the image stabilizer for filming is also great, since you get more fluent shots and you don't need to stabilize more in post. Two modes will help you to improve your shots. Mode 1 works in all directions, where Mode 2 is best for panning shots for a motion blurred background. In terms of sharpness, you won't really note a big difference. Bear in mind that the 2.8 version is slightly older than the brand new f4 version of the second generation. We took all of these photos using my 5D Mark IV, and to be honest with you, I did not see any major difference. The best thing you can do is to download some of these files in full resolution and compare them on your screen at home. I provide a download link in the description below. There's a bridge close by my house called Alte Brücke, where I spent some time to compare several focal length settings. There might be some customers who don't really know what to expect with a 200mm lens. With these time-lapse scenes, you should know now what to expect. Feel free to use both lenses on all Canon cameras. It does not really matter if you have a Canon EOS 200D, 2000D or maybe a Canon EOS 80D. They are both EF lenses which may be used on all Canon APS-C sensor and full frame cameras. If you like to take your photos using the live view of your Canon EOS 5D Mark IV, it will not cause any trouble at all. I took these files during the sunset. It takes about 1.5 seconds using both lenses to change from fore to the background. That's a great speed if your camera is remote controlled or for tracking subjects. One major reason to have a 70 to 200mm lens is for portrait shootings. It's almost a perfect lens for all weddings except for wide angles. I use the 2.8 version for most of my YouTube videos as well. If you're in Frankfurt and you are looking for a great place to have a drink, make sure to check out the Drinksmith neighborhood bar. Great beer, cocktails and a lot of English-speaking people are waiting for you. A perfect place to take some photos of Daniel, the bartender. That's a place where the 2.8 aperture is more favorable than the f4 version. As long as there's enough ambient light available, it doesn't really matter which version you're using. Taking photos in a church, in a dark place like a bar or during concerts, I highly recommend getting the 2.8 version if you earn most money with these kinds of photography. I took the f4 version during an event shooting with me into the Gibson Club in Frankfurt, and it was really hard to get decent shots under ISO 6400. The best part at the end of this review, the bokeh. Despite the different aperture, the bokeh does almost look the same on either lens. On the final image, it's really hard to see the difference. The most important aspect is the final quality of the bokeh, and in either case it looks great. Both lenses are great to isolate any subjects from the fore or background. If you are still not convinced, make sure to download some examples from the video description below. And now it's time for a conclusion. Canon made two brilliant lenses for your Canon DSLR. The most important question is, which one is better for your project? They are both great in terms of autofocus capabilities and image stabilization, especially for filming or low light shots with longer exposure times. Both lenses satisfy with a great sharpness, also at the fastest aperture. The 2.8 version is a lot better if you plan to use it for low light shootings, weddings and concerts. However, it's much heavier and bigger than the f4 version. The f4 version is much lighter and smaller, which is great if you travel a lot. If you take more photos during daylight, save the money and get the cheaper f4 version. Thanks to all who supported me for this review. Make sure to stop by if you're in Frankfurt. Feel free to post a comment below for what you are using these lenses. See you soon and tschüss from Germany.